Number 11. Death by MAYO. On December 17, 2020, a young man from Iowa was sent to prison for life after brutally murdering his friend with a pickup truck. So, why did he do it? It's because they got into a fight over mayonnaise. 29-year-old Christopher Erlbacher and 30-year-old Caleb Solberg had gone out one night to have some drinks at the bar. They were also accompanied by an unnamed person. The friends were having a great time in Moorhead, but things quickly turned sour when Erlbacher poured mayo all over Solberg's dinner as a joke. Of course, he meant for it to be funny, but it had the opposite effect. Solberg was enraged, so much so that a bar fight broke out. On his way to a cafe after the incident, Erlbacher called Solberg's half-brother Craig Pryor, and let's just say he was still caught up over the mayo. He threatened to set Solberg's house on fire and even shoot him. He sounded so serious that Pryor drove about 9 minutes down to the establishment Dave's old home in Pisgah, Iowa, where a new fight had begun. As the conflict went on, things escalated and Erlbacher's truck slammed into Pryor's. Then Erlbacher went straight for Solberg. The initial blow of the large pickup truck wasn't enough to kill his friend, and according to the district judge's verdict, the victim screamed out for his brother to save him. Instead of taking that as a chance to let everything go, Erlbacher drove down the street and circled around to hit Solberg another time. After that, he still wasn't sure if Solberg was dead, so he decided to drive the truck over him again just to be safe. The culprit tried to escape afterwards, but the truck gave up on him a short distance away from the crime scene. That's when he called Pryor to confess that he killed Solberg. Erlbacher was convicted of murder in December 2021, and in 2022, he was sentenced to life in prison. Number 10. Facebook kills. In January 2012, a couple was discovered murdered in their rural Tennessee home with their baby still alive in its mother's arms, all because they unfriended a woman on Facebook. 23-year-old Billie Jean Hayworth had a happy little life with her 36-year-old fiancé, Bill Payne, until she made a grave mistake. She removed 30-year-old Janella Potter from her friends list. Janella lived with her father, 64-year-old Marvin Buddy Potter, and her mother, Barbara Potter. Initially, when the bloodbath was uncovered at Payne's house, there was no suspects. But 1 week later, the Tennessee Bureau of Investigation arrested Marvin and Janella's boyfriend, Jamie Lynn Curd. The victims were living with Payne's dad, who left the house early the morning of the killings. After an investigation, authorities discovered that when the couple were left alone in the house that morning, both Curd and Marvin broke in and shot Payne in the head. A neighbor came to get mail from the house around 5 hours later, and that's when he discovered the dead bodies. Payne's body was found in the bathroom, with his throat slashed open, while Hayworth was dead in the baby's room with a gunshot wound in her face. Both Marvin and Jamie were charged with first-degree murder, but it seemed the mastermind was hiding in plain sight. Investigators believe Barbara and Janella both convinced Potter to go through with the crime. When the daughter was questioned, she ironically said that she only learnt of the couple's death through a Facebook post, after which she went on a rant about how Hayworth and Payne had been harassing her constantly online. Physically, no evidence was found to connect either Janella or Barbara to the crime scene, and consequently the women were not held as suspects initially. In 2015, they were tried and sentenced to life behind bars. Number 9. A deadly fight for control. In June 2010, a South African man's family was accused of beating him to death simply because he wanted to watch the Football World Cup match instead of a religious service on TV. David Makwea was a 61-year-old from Makwea in the Limpopo province, and on the night of his death he got into a terrible fight with his wife and 2 children because he wanted the remote control. Usually, these kind of family disputes tend to be light-hearted, but this was different. It seemed that he was committed to watching Germany's World Cup match against Australia that day. The others, though, preferred to see a gospel performance. According to a police spokesman named Motamani Molefo, the moment he said no to the gospel was the moment the disagreement started, and at first the dispute was strictly vocal. But then, somewhere in the middle of their debate, the wife and children started hitting Makwea. The reports say that Makwea was beaten up by Francina, his 68-year-old wife, and his 2 adult children, 36-year-old son Colin and 23-year-old daughter Lebogang. Malefa stated that the crime scene appeared to hint at the fact that the family hit his head hard against the wall, but his death could have been caused by something else. There was a small chance for him to be saved, according to the police, but the families didn't call emergency responders until they realized he was seriously hurt, and by the time they got there, he was already long gone. Consequently, all 3 of his family members were taken to the police station. Only Lebogang was released on a $200 bail. Mokoena was buried on the Saturday after his murder. It's unclear what the result of this case was, but hopefully justice was served for Mokoena. Number 8. Spoiled Brat. On March 14, 2008, a man violently murdered his own mother. Why? Because she refused to get him tickets for an Avril Lavigne concert. 35-year-old Robert Lyons attacked his mom, Linda Bolek, after she declined to call a friend and get him the Skybox tickets. The 61-year-old woman was brutally beaten up before being stabbed to death. According to the prosecution team, Lyons kept hitting Bolek in the head with a cognac bottle before stabbing her 9 times in the back. He kept stabbing her even after she died to make sure the job was done. The attack was so brutal that the knife blade broke off inside her body. Another knife was then used in the murder, with that one bending from the pressure of the attack. But Lyons wasn't done yet. The hate he had for his mom at that moment made him lose control, so he dumped all sorts of household cleaning chemicals over her body, which he said was to humiliate her corpse. Then, as if nothing had ever happened, the man went out on a shopping trip and was arrested later that night in Illinois while he was sitting inside a Hooters restaurant. Lyons' attorneys argued that he should be convicted of second-degree murder with a sentence of 4 to 20 years. They wanted this instead of a life sentence that would have come with a first-degree murder charge. His history of bipolar disorder gave them the chance to argue that he didn't mean to kill his mom. He was just triggered when Bolek held a kitchen knife during their argument. In the end, the jury decided that Lyons intended to kill his mother, which means he's facing 40 years in DuPage County Prison. Number 7. Farmville or Baby. In January 2010, a 3-month-old baby was shaken to death by its Florida mother. The reason? She was too caught up in her computer game to deal with the crying child. Interestingly, 22-year-old Alexandra Tobias had taken a personality test only a day before this tragic event, the result of which she proudly flaunted on her Facebook page. The test said she was bipolar, but who would have thought it was actually true? The next morning, her son, Dylan Lee Edmondson, was admitted into the hospital and died due to head injuries. She tried to bend the truth, implying that it was an accident, but everybody, including the investigators, saw through the lies. She had dreams of going to college and maintained a healthy image of herself, leading everyone to think she was an amazing mother. But as she played her games on Facebook, she shook her baby to get him to quiet down, causing a miserable, painful death for the infant. Instead of calling 911 to report that her child stopped breathing, she called the baby's father, E.J. Edmondson, hysterically crying. When she finally got through to the authorities, she was having trouble following the operator's instructions for mouth-to-mouth and chest compressions, while the rescue squad was dispatched. The circuit judge, Adrian G. Soud, gave her 50 years in prison. The decision was reached after many hours of testimony. It turned out Alexandra had recently found her mother dead in 2008, only 2 years before the incident, and had also been raped in her youth. Other than that, her college plans were cut short when she got pregnant. She and Edmondson had an unhealthy relationship that got them arrested for domestic violence a few weeks before the baby died. While in jail, she told different versions of the story. Alexandra sometimes told inmates that she smashed the baby's head off the computer monitor while shaking him, while other times she simply blamed it all on her past trauma. Regardless, her sentence was the highest end of a plea bargain negotiated in October of that year, and Alexandra pleaded guilty to second-degree murder. Number 6. Eggs gone wrong. In September 2010, a Kentucky man chased his wife across the lawns of 7 houses while in his pajamas to kill her with a 12-gauge pump-action shotgun. He went through that trouble just because she didn't cook his eggs right. 47-year-old Stanley Neese shot himself in the head when he got back home after killing 5 people in his violent fit of rage. 54-year-old Sandra Neese was the gunman's wife and victim. Their 28-year-old daughter, Sandra Strong, was also killed in the rampage. Others who were shot by Neese included his neighbors, Denise Turner and Tammy Kilbourne. Teresa Fugate, an additional victim, was murdered in front of her 7-year-old daughter. According to Turner and Fugate's relative Sherry Ann Robinson, there were witnesses at the scene who confirmed that Neese got angry after being unhappy with how his eggs were cooked for him that morning. But there was nothing new about the man's outrageous outburst. He always had a nasty temper. It had been getting considerably worse in the few months before the shootings. His temper almost got the family evicted by their landlord, since even the smallest inconveniences would set him off. The state police arrived almost an hour after the shooting began. When they got to the crime scene, they heard a single last gunshot. According to the neighbors, Stanley was mumbling something while standing on the porch of his house when he raised the shotgun up to his head and shot himself. Because the killer was dead, no convictions were made for the murder of 5 Kentucky citizens. What do you think Stanley was mumbling? Tell us in the comments below and hit subscribe while you're down there to join the Bad Badger family. Number 5. Relationship troubles. On April 6, 2023, a San Antonio man gunned his girlfriend down after finding out that she didn't want to have his baby. 23-year-old Adam Bird was charged with murder for fatally shooting 22-year-old Jade Alyssa Alvarez. This happened just a few days after he robbed a store at gunpoint, and at the time of his arrest, he already had an active Bexar County arrest warrant out. Alvarez's body was located at 6:30 a.m. the morning after her death. She had severe gunshot wounds that detectives say took her life. Police were told by a witness who was with Alvarez that night before the shooting that the victim was in a relationship with Bird. He had been talking to Alvarez through the witness's phone as he asked for her to get dropped off at Capitol Avenue the same night. Unfortunately, that's where he killed her, since the victim's body was later found in the same spot. Bird confessed to killing Alvarez after being detained and questioned by investigators about his robbery. He went into detail, explaining that the two argued over the subject of having children together. He wanted to have one with her, but she refused the idea. He also confessed that he used the same gun for her murder that he used in the robbery. Bird was sent to Bexar County Jail, with the bond for his murder charge set at $250,000. Number 4. A pretty harmful joke. In October 2012, a 16-year-old girl lost her life after being beaten up by a friend, all because she made fun of the girl for farting. Shakira Dorsey studied at Warrensville Heights High School in Ohio. She was murdered by her classmates after being pushed to the ground and punched multiple times. The argument started off when Dorsey teased her friend, and shortly after that, she was dead. Her underage attacker, who was not identified, was charged with the murder. In response to 911 calls made after the incident that happened during the afternoon, the officers made it to the scene while an ambulance was treating the victim. At the time, Shakira was not yet dead, just passed out. The family confirmed that she had no medical conditions before the incident, which is why the cause of her death was a mystery to them. Dorsey's stepdad was present there, but he didn't speak up. When he was questioned by police officers about what his stepdaughter had been up to, he gave vague responses and was hesitant about giving information. After being asked again, he remembered the events in detail and said that as he pulled up in front of 4796 Walford Street, Ohio, his daughter jumped out the backseat of his vehicle and ran up to an SUV. After a while, she came out with a girl, and the two seemed to be in an argument that soon turned physical. One of the 911 calls revealed that the two had been fighting at the end of a man's driveway while adults weren't doing anything about it. Eventually, Dorsey's stepdad broke them up, after which the teen collapsed to the lawn. After her death, her high school released a statement regarding the tragic events, remembering her as an 11th grade student and a dedicated member of the Lady Tigers softball team. Number 3. Pangs of Hunger. One Tuesday night in September 2012, 2 men in St. Louis got into a little fight over a bag of chips, but it tragically ended with one of them dying in a hospital bed. 42-year-old Roger Wilkes had no clue what was coming for him as he stood on the street with a pack of Cheetos. As witnesses watched in horror, another man came to him and began an intense fight over the snack. What might have started out as a harmless back-and-forth banter soon ended with the man sticking a knife through Wilkes. The single stab was fatal, as the wounded man was taken to the hospital. They fought to save Wilkes, but he did not survive. The man who killed him is said to be 49-year-old David Scott. He was seen fleeing the scene right after he stabbed the victim. Scott tried to get away near the Metrolink station on Washington Avenue, but police officers caught up to him pretty quickly. He was charged with second-degree murder and armed criminal action. But he wasn't exactly a first offender. He had a long list of past convictions that included the robbery of a post office, assault, and burglary. Right after the stabbing, the street of the crime scene was shut down and no traffic could pass through for almost an hour as the investigation was carried out. They found a knife nearby, and that confirmed the suspected killer. The police initially believed that both of the men were homeless, but corrected their assumption a bit later, stating that Wilkes used to live on Delmar Boulevard, while Scott lived on North 9th Street. Number 2. The tiff over chopsticks. In March 2009, a woman lost her life at the hands of her boyfriend after they got into a petty fight over a set of chopsticks. 19-year-old Tan Tik Soon believed that his 20-year-old girlfriend Chong Kar-yin wanted to end their relationship for good. The seed of doubt stayed in him and festered until, in a fit of rage, he shoved his lover from the 12th floor. Soon after that, he jumped after her to follow her in death as some sort of poetic statement of dying together, but instead, he survived the long fall. Unfortunately, this meant that he would have to face the consequences of what he did to his girlfriend. Tan, who was a welder by trade, met Chong through a mutual friend. She was a waitress in Singapore, and both of the Malaysian citizens had jobs. After a month of getting to know one another through casual dating, the pair made their relationship official and had been together for 5 months when tragedy struck. At around 11:30 p.m. on March 6, 2009, the couple met up at the hawker stand for a date. Chong got some fishball noodles for herself and after a while asked Tan if they could get another pair of chopsticks. But he refused to grab them for her, so Chong quickly got upset and didn't want to talk to Tan anymore. She gave in when he tried to make her feel better by feeding her a fishball out of his hand, and things seemed fine for a while. But jealousy soon struck Tan hard when he noticed that Chong was often busy with her phone when they had meals together. As the two had a conversation on their way back to the girl's home in Ang Mo Kio Avenue 3, it quickly turned into a big fight. The tension kept building, ready to burst at any moment. As the two got to the 12th floor of her building, Chong told Tan that they would never be able to deal with each other's bad tempers effectively. After hearing this, Tan took it the wrong way. He thought his girlfriend was trying to break up with him. He decided then and there that he would die with her. That's when he pushed Chong off the parapet. After he saw that she was dead, he threw himself off as well, but his fall was interrupted thanks to some metal scaffolding that got in his way and broke the descent. That's how he survived, only to later plead guilty to culpable homicide. He was sentenced to 14 years in prison for the passion-filled murder. Number 1. No more toilet paper. In February 2006, two friends got into a fight over toilet paper, and tragically, it ended with one of them being beaten to death. 56-year-old Moss Bluff, Florida resident Frank Crow, and his 58-year-old roommate Kenneth Matthews got into a fight one night when they ran out of toilet paper. And though it may sound ridiculous, things went badly for the two. Crow originally denied any involvement with the murder that happened at their apartment, but after being questioned, he confessed. He claimed Matthews pulled out a weapon as things escalated after the fight broke out. It seems that his roommate was a bit slow, since Crow was able to beat Matthews with the sledgehammer and clawhammer in some sort of self-defense claim. A few witnesses saw it all happen, so it wasn't hard for law enforcement to figure out who the killer was. But in his self-defense, Crow beat his roommate up so badly that he was barely recognizable. Matthews's fingerprints had to be used in order to identify him, so Crow was eventually charged with homicide and given a life sentence without the option of bail. Thanks for watching. Which one of these seemed like the stupidest reason for killing a person to you? Tell us in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe. See you next time on Bad Badger. Bye for now.